Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Thank you so much for coming. My name's Amy Draves, and I am delighted to welcome William Gibson back to the Microsoft Research Visiting Speaker Series. He will be discussing his new novel, The Peripheral. Bill would like to be known for more than the terms he's coined or for the inaccurate eccentricities attributed to him. He has written several screenplays and television episodes and has authored numerous short stories and books, including Neuromancer, Pattern Recognition, and Zero History. Neuromancer was the first novel to win the top 3 science fiction prizes, the Hugo, the Nebula, and the Philip K. Dick Award. Please join me in giving him a very warm welcome.
Okay, with no further ado, although I should say that I've scarcely read any of this yet because this is publication day and the first day of the tour. And it's like it's the first time I hear it myself. And it can be weird, it can be wonderful. But I mean, for me, it can be like, whoa, what did I write? But anyway, it's all a process of acceptance, really, because now it's set in stone. But I'm starting to suspect that this is not an easy book to give readings from because it's a long book made up of lots and lots of little chapters, and the first 100 pages or so are going to be like heavy going for someone who's not, someone who doesn't have pretty much a native culture of reading this sort of fiction, because there's no explanation of anything that's going on, and neither of the two protagonists, who are in a sense in different worlds, ever thinks about the technology in their world, nor in fact do they understand how it works, just as most people in our world don't understand how a cell phone works. So you're seeing everything through this character's point of view, and she takes it all for granted. And all I'll say about her is that she's living maybe 15 or 20 years from now, somewhere, it's never specified where, in the United States. It's apparently more or less southeastern. I didn't want the state to be identifiable from the text, and none of her town remains unnamed, and the other town names in her state are imaginary, as far as I know. So it's no place in particular. Every review says it's a different place. Like it's Alabama, it's Arkansas, it's Virginia, it's West Virginia. It's not really any place in particular, but I think it's undoubtedly colored by my childhood growing up in southwestern Virginia. And this is a character named Flynne, and this is the story of how she got the online gamer handle Easy Ice, and what she does, what she's been doing for a living. She quits gaming for a living because of what happens in this chapter. unstuck her in time, day sleeping in her bedroom. How old was she? 7, 17, 27? Was it dusk or dawn? Couldn't tell by the light outside. Checked her phone, evening. The house silent, her mother probably asleep. Out through the smell of her grandfather's 50 years of National Geographic shelved in the hall. Downstairs, she found lukewarm coffee in the pot on the stove, then went out back for a shower in the fading light. Sun had warmed the water just right. Came out of the stall wrapped in Burton's old bathrobe, rubbing her hair with a towel, ready to dress for the job. Something she'd gotten from Burton in the Corps, that you didn't do things in the clothes you sat around in. You got yourself squared away, then your intent did too. When she'd been Dwight's recon point, she'd made sure she got cleaned up. Doubted she'd be doing that again, even though it was the best money she'd made. She didn't like gaming, not the way Madison and Janice did. She'd done it for the money. Got so good at one particular rank and mission in Operation Northwind that Dwight wouldn't have anybody else. Except that he would, by now. She wanted to be sharp tonight, not just for the job. She wanted to see as much as she could of that London. Maybe it was a game she could get into. Burton said it wasn't a shooter. She wanted to know more about the woman, see more of how she lived. She went back upstairs, dug through the clothes piled on the armchair, found her newest black jeans, which were still really black, and the short-sleeved black shirt from when she'd worked at Coffee Jones. Sort of military patch pockets and those strap things on the shoulders. She'd taken the Coffee Jones embroidery off, left the Flynne in red script over the left pocket. Her sneakers didn't work with black, but they were all she had. She was planning to have Macon fab her some funny ones, but she hadn't found any she really liked for him to copy. Back in the kitchen, she made herself a ham and cheese sandwich, snapped it into Tupperware, bent her phone around her left wrist, and headed down to the trailer in the dark, listening to the new Kissing Cranes track. Leon rang her before the chorus. She left it on her wrist. "Hey," he said. "Get him out yet?" Or rather, sorry, "Hey," she said. "Get him out yet?" "Home's getting ready to let them all go," Leon said. "Luke's decided the Lord's work's about done for now." "So what have you been doing?" she asked. "Fucking the dog," he said. "Shot a bunch of pools, slept in the car, kept my ass off the street." "You talked to Burton again?" she asked. "No," he said. "They put them all in the center of the track at West Davis High. I could go up in the bleachers and watch him playing cards or eating MREs or sleeping. Not much point." Maybe she thought it was dull enough to keep Burton from going up there next time, but she doubted it. "When they let him out," she said, "you get him to call me." "Will do," Leon said. As Kissing Cranes came back on, she saw the tube of hand sanitizer on the door of the composting toilet. It was covered with QRs and requisition numbers, their ink starting to fade. But she'd already used the toilet in the house. As she opened the trailer's door, it struck her that Burton never locked it, didn't even have a lock. Nobody was coming in without him asking. She'd forgotten how hot it would get, sitting closed all day. Leon wanted to AC it, but Burton wasn't interested. He usually wasn't there in the daytime. Maybe her shirt and jeans hadn't been a good idea. She put the sandwich in the fridge, got the windows open as far as she could. A gold and black spider had started spinning a web across one of the foam tunnels outside. She tidied up a little, straightening things. As she moved around, the Chinese chair tried to adjust itself for her. She wasn't sure she'd want to live with that, but when she finally sat down on it, it was just right. Took her phone off, bent it to her preferred controller angle, waved it above the display, checked Badger. Shailene was already back at Fab, still showing anxiety, and Burton was now indicated off map, which turned out to be the Hefty Mart parking lot in Davisville, which she guessed would be filled with big white Homeland trucks, one of them with Burton's phone locked up in it. She frowned. Holmes would know that she'd just checked that, which was okay. What wasn't okay would be if they noticed that her phone was funny. Nothing to be done about it, though. She got out of Badger and back into the searches she had run for London the night before. She kept hoping Burton would phone, that they'd already let him out. But really it felt they would from what Leon said, so she kept clicking deeper into random London. City in the game was London for sure, but with something bigger and harder looking grown up out of it. When it was time, she got the login out of the Tomahawk case, waved a finger for Milagros Cold Iron essay, and entered the string. This time she'd planned what she'd look at going up. She got a closer look at the van as the copter emerged. More like an armored car than a van, sort of heavy-shouldered like Connor's trike. The bay she'd come out of was square and dark. She heard the voices, urgent still and just as impossible to understand. Same time of day she'd arrived before, late dusk. Wetter clouds, the building's black bronze face dull with condensation. Next, she located the street she'd noticed before, the one that seemed to be paved with something like glass lit from underneath. Water under there, moving. Looked for vehicles, seeing 3. As the counter at 10 o'clock ticked off the 20th floor, the voices were gone. She first noticed it, the gray thing, as she passed the 23rd, a dry gray against the wet dark metal, color of dead skin pulled from a blister, size of a child's backpack. Then she was past it, giving her full attention to a check in 3 directions, point recon style. Big dark towers, same height, far apart in their grid across the older city. Hers most likely one of them. No whale thing in the sky now. Gaming having taught her to pay attention to anything that didn't fit, she tried to get a quick second look down cam at the backpack. Couldn't find it. It overtook and passed her as she reached the 37th floor. Moving that way, it no longer reminded her of a backpack, but of the black egg case of an almost extinct animal called a skate that she'd seen on a beach in South Carolina, an alien-looking rectangle with a single twisted horn at each corner. Tumbling straight up the building now in a smooth sequence of sticky-footed somersaults, caught itself with the 2 tips of whichever pair of horns or legs was leading, flipped over, then propelled itself higher with the pair it had just used to grip the surface. Following it up cam, she tried to rise more quickly, but that still wasn't under her control. Lost sight of it again. Maybe there had been a way for it to enter the building. She'd watched Macon print little pneumatic bots like big leeches that moved something like that, but slower. Her mother called a skate case a mermaid's purse, but Burton said the local people had called them devil's handbags. It had looked like it ought to be dangerous, poisonous, but it wasn't. Kept an eye out for the thing the rest of the way up to the 56th floor, where she found the same balcony folded down but the window frosted, disappointing. Guessed she'd missed the party, but maybe she could get an idea how it had gone. Bugs didn't seem to be around. Whatever had kept the ride up like an elevator was gone now. She ran a quick perimeter check, hoping for another window, but nothing had changed, no bugs either. Back to the frosted glass. Gave it 5 minutes there, 5 more, then ran another perimeter. On the far side, a grate she hadn't noticed before was steaming. She was starting to miss the bugs. Down camera, a very large vehicle with a single headlight went by, fast. She'd just gotten around to the window again when it depolarized, and there was the woman saying something to someone she couldn't see. Flynne stopped, let the gyros hold her there. No sign there had ever been a party. Room didn't look the same, like all the little bots had been moving serious furniture. The long table was gone. Now there were armchairs, a couch, rugs, softer lighting. The woman wore striped pajama bottoms and a black t-shirt. Flynne guessed she'd only recently gotten out of bed because she had the bedhead you could only have with hair that good. Check for bugs, she reminded herself, but they still weren't there. The woman laughed as if the person Flynne couldn't see had said something. Had that been her ass against the window the time before? Was she talking to the man who'd kissed her or tried to? Had that worked out after all, the party great, and then they'd spent the night together? She forced herself to do another perimeter, a slow one, watching for bugs, the runaway backpack, anything. The steam had gone, and now she couldn't see where the grate had been. That gave her the feeling that the building was alive, maybe conscious, with the woman inside it laughing high up in the bugless night. Thinking that, she felt close heat in the trailer, sweat trickling. Darker now, so few lights in the city, and none at all on the big blank towers. Coming back around, she found him standing at the window, looking out, his arm around her. Just that much taller than she was, like a model from an ad where they didn't want to stress ethnicity, dark hair and the start of a beard to match, expression cold. The woman spoke, he answered, and the coldness Flynne had seen was gone. The woman beside him wouldn't have seen it at all. He wore a dark brown robe. You smile a lot, she thought. Part of the glass in front of them was sliding sideways, and as it did, a skinny horizontal rod rose from the forward edge of the ledge, bringing up a quivering soap bubble. The rod stopped rising. Bubble became greenish glass. She remembered the SS officer when she'd worked for Dwight. Face of the man at the window reminded her. She'd crouched for 3 days on Janice and Madison's couch, taking her old phone when she ran to the bathroom and back so as not to miss her chance to kill him. Janice brought her the herbal tea Burton made her have with the wakey he had left. White pills built 2 counties over. No coffee, he said. The SS officer was really an accountant in Florida, the man Dwight played against, and nobody had ever killed him. Dwight never fought himself, just relayed orders from the tacticians he hired. The Florida accountant was his own tactician and a stone killer to boot. When he won a campaign, which he usually did, Dwight lost money. That kind of gambling was illegal federally, but there were ways around that. Neither Dwight nor the accountant needed the money they won or cared about what they lost. Not really. Players like Finn were paid on the basis of kills and on how long they could survive in a given campaign. She had gotten to feeling that what the accountant most liked about killing them was that it really cost them. Not just that he was better at it than they were, but that it actually hurt them to lose. People on her squad were feeding their children with what they earned playing. And maybe that was all they had, like she was paying Pharma John for her mother's prescriptions. Now he'd gone and done it again, killed everyone on her squad, one after another, taking his time, enjoying it. He was hunting her now while she circled alone, deeper into the French forest and the flying snow. But then Madison called Burton, and Burton came over and sat on the couch beside her, watching her play, and told her how he saw it. How the SS officer convinced he was hunting her wasn't seeing it right. Because really now, Burton said, she was hunting him, or would be as soon as she realized she was, while his failure to see it was a done deal, fully underway, growing, a wrong path. He said he'd show her how to see it, but he'd need her not to sleep. He gave Janice the white pills, drew a dosing schedule on a napkin. The accountant would sleep in Florida, leaving his character on some very good AI, but Flynne wouldn't. So Janice had given her the pills according to the napkin, and Burton had kept coming around on some schedule of his own to sit with her and watch and tell her how he saw it. And sometimes she felt him jerk, haptic misfire while he was helping her find her own way of seeing it. Not to learn it, he said, because it couldn't be taught, but to spiral in with it, each turn tighter, further into the forest, each turn closer to seeing it exactly right. Down into that one shot across the clearing she found there, where the sudden mist of airborne blood blown with the snow was like the term balancing an equation. She'd been alone on the couch then. Janice heard her scream, got up, walked out on their porch, puked up tea, shaking, cried while Janice washed her face. And Dwight gave her so much money, but she never once walked point for him again or ever saw that ragged France. So why was this all up in her now, watching this guy with the little beard squeeze the woman beside him closer? Why, when she'd run her perimeter around the corner, did she take it up to 57 and double back? Why was she all easy ice now, if this wasn't a shooter? Thank you. So, I can take questions if anybody. Oh yeah, okay, there's a mic. So those of you who feel bold can go to the mic. Don't be shy.
Hey, Mr. Gibson, big fan.
Hey.
So, turn the mic on. Thank you. Hello. Can you hear me if I just talk loud?
Yeah.
You're good. Okay. Hey, Mr. Gibson. So I had a question for you about kind of the sequences of your books. Like your first Matrix trilogy was very different from like All Tomorrow's Parties and Zero History that seemed to be set in the present, but like an ennui sense about the present. And then this book seems to be less sci-fi, but more about just the world we're in. I was just kind of curious if that's a deliberate shift on your part, or is that just...
Well, that was one of two narrative threads. There's, without getting all spoilery, there's another narrative thread that's like way sci-fi and sort of, but in a Michael Moorcock, M. John Harrison, possibly Mervyn Peake sort of way, like very, very post-Sing. Like what you just heard, those guys are like 15 or 20 years from now, and they might as well be now, but it's got different parts. But my first three novels were set, it never says, but I always figured around 2035, and they were written in the 80s and 90s, and the second set was written in the 90s, and it was set about now. So now the three books that started with Virtual Light, those are kind of best read now as alternate history, because we didn't have the great San Francisco earthquake and whatnot. And then I wrote the three books that started with pattern recognition, which I thought of as speculative novels of the very recent past, because each one was set in the year before its publication. But I'm convinced that a lot of readers never noticed that they weren't set in the future. In fact, I know that to be true. A certain number of readers never even noticed that they weren't set in the future, which was sort of the bet I had made with myself. I used the toolkit that I had developed to do the first 6 books to write contemporary fiction, and it felt very much the same. But this one is not. Well, for one thing, it's like I'm pretty sure that this is a standalone piece. It isn't the sort of book that, in my opinion, should have any sequels. And I've got a pretty good idea of what the next one is, and it's completely different again. So I think I'm going to try to stick with one-off novels for a while. Novels were originally called that because they were novel. There's that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, also a huge fan. Thank you for coming. So, question, I'm sorry, this is going to stir any problems, but one of your first novels, you have this kind of, you briefly touched on the subject of people kind of making a religion out of AI. I don't know. And this is basically something that I want to ask if you've seen anything like this in actual life. Maybe something that's starting to happen where people who don't understand how cell phone works, they make a religion out of it. You know, that type of.
Well, Elon Musk, not 48 hours ago, warned that making AI was like trafficking with demons, or at least so I saw it claimed on Twitter. So the meme was drifting around, and I wasn't. That's like it was back in the 80s. I wasn't proposing that people. Like it's actually an interesting. It's an interesting question. Like, could there be a religion based on cell phones, based on smartphones? Could we not be all participating in a religion based on smartphones without even knowing it? I don't know. But particularly when in my early work, I was inclined to look for themes in science fiction and try to go in the opposite direction. And there's a theme in science fiction that had been around since before I started writing of demon-like AI. I think of a Harlan Ellison story called "I Have No Mouth, But I Must Scream," which I read years before I wrote Neuromancer, but it's really a precursor in its way to Wintermute and Neuromancer in that novel. But when I wrote Count Zero, the people who have the religion around AI, maybe if their world has Christians, the Christians think they're trafficking with demons, but they think they're communicating with ancient African gods. Like, one people's gods wind up being another people's demons somewhere down the road. That's a kind of historical constant, I think. So anyway, I'm rambling, so I guess I've answered it as best I can.
Thank you. Hello, sir. When it comes to, I guess, religious takes on AI and all, you have like, what's his name? Asimov's Last Question and Frederick Brown's Answer, which I think make an excellent counterpoint with each other. Anyhow, I guess sort of building on that and something you said earlier about these people are using technology that they don't really understand or anything like that. To a certain extent, do you feel this is sort of blending into fantasy? I mean, in a way, if you just, changed the window dressing, couldn't it just be magic and actual demons or what have you?
Well, then there's Arthur C. Clarke's dictum that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So with this book, there's a deliberate, in certain aspects of it, there was a very deliberate choice to do this kind of hand-wavy thing and say, it's just technology. But that's like the 22nd century talking to the mid 21st. And none of the people in the story are scientists, and there are a few technologists. So nobody really in the story really knows what the science is anyway. But I've never cared about the science. I care about what emergent technology does in terms of social change, and I think it's actually been the primary change driver for a very, very long time now, like very much predating the digital, like back to cereal and cities. Those were like way radical emergent technologies once. And I think we live on the top of a kind of pyramid of technology. We take the lower levels, cereal and cities and sewage, we take those absolutely for granted. You take them away, we're fucked. The rest of it comes down. So you know, when I wrote Neuromancer, I didn't know anything about actual computers, and you know, I've never made any bones about that still being the case. I infer it all from how I see people behaving with it. And I've always inferred a certain amount of it from the poetry of neologism emerging from your field. Like the first time I ever heard interface used as a verb, you could have scraped me up off the floor. It actually happened in Seattle. It happened in a hotel near SeaTac, and I heard interface. I remember it. I thought, holy shit, that is amazing. That's going to change everything, and it did. But I got it from the poetics, and not from technical or scientific understanding. So there's a kind of playful coming out, if you will, with that in this book. And like the key part of the impossible shit that I'm claiming happens in this book is based on something that the characters call the server, and nobody knows where it is or what it does. It's just that if you can decrypt your very difficult way into it, that you can then do really fantastic things with your internet. So,
all right. So
anyway, good
I guess
question.
the metaphors of modernity. All right, thank you.
Okay.
Hi. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on the possibility of there being a movie version of Neuromancer ever made, and whether or not it would be a good idea at this point.
Oh, I don't know. It would depend on who made it. There's a sense in which it could be argued that Neuromancer has already been made piecemeal over the past 30 years. Like we've all seen bits and pieces of it on the big screen, and it could happen. And it could happen, and if it happened, it would be like, I would get a nice paycheck. But the results, like, who knows? And I'm baffled by an idea that I think I sometimes encounter, is that a Hollywood movie is the ultimate and final expression of a novel, without which the novel remains a kind of larval thing. And often people who hold that view are people who've never really understood that the experience they had reading Neuromancer was absolutely unique to them. And as a one-time honors student in literary critical methodology, I was taught something called the interpretive fallacy. And the interpretive fallacy, which I actually believe absolutely in, is marvelous help with shitty book reviews, is that there's no text. It's like the tree falling in the forest when there's nobody there. There's no one text. The text happens in the reader's head. It's like a combination, and no two people have the same experience. It's also true of a film, but more peculiarly so with a written text. And The interpretive fallacy is probably responsible for more evil shit in human history than anything else, because religion is not a problem until you get somebody who thinks they know what the Bible or whichever text they're into says. And you say to them, no, that's just your interpretation of it, and they kill you. You can look on the internet, it's happening every day. But anyway, I don't know. I don't have any news to report. On the neuromancer front, there does seem to be, there's currently more of a chance of pattern recognition being turned into a feature film. And I can't even say very much about that, but that one, my Hollywood agent said, he's never said this to me before, he said, it's amazing, this is actually behaving the way these deals behave before they become movies. So the first for me. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. If any of your books get turned into films, try to get Chris Cunningham back on board.
Oh, I would love it. I love him.
Hi there.
Yeah.
I think as a person who works in machine learning and computers, that we all have a different perspective. Like you talked about, as we read these books, we talk to someone else, and I think that they read a completely different book. To your last question, but so I had two questions. Hopefully, you can choose one or answer both. One is sort of more mundane. You include so many elements of real culture in your books, whether it's Case's jacket or the watches and so forth. So I'm wondering if you do much research for that stuff, or you just sort of absorb things through your peripheral vision, if you will.
No, I do almost no conscious formal research, so that the catalog of stuff in my books is actually the result of my own random encounters with reality.
Cool. So my other question is, when I read a book, sometimes I'm in awe of the book or inspired by it, or just think, oh, I could do better. Is there a book you read recently that you just think, wow, that's the kind of book that you also would like to write, or that you find inspiring?
Most recently, Let's
be recent, I suppose.
I was inspired. I usually can't read fiction while I'm writing fiction, so this book took a long time to write, so I'm really behind on reading fiction. Really close friends of mine who are like wonderful writers have published what I'm sure are completely delightful books for the past couple of years, and I've scarcely been able to read any of them, which I'm looking forward to rectifying now. But for one reason or another, I was able during the course of writing this to read Ned Bowman's second novel, The Teleportation Accident. And it inspired me. It didn't inspire me to write something like it, but it just inspired me that Ned Bowman wrote it. Like I was sitting there reading this thing going, damn, I am old. And it just like delighted me, because I don't get that from imaginative fiction all that much. And more recently, after I turned this in only in mid-July, and after turning it in, I read Ned's third novel, Glow, which is sort of like, this isn't, not that this does it justice, but just kind of the ballpark. It's kind of like if the three Big End novels and Pynchon's The Crying of Lot 49 could be engraved on the head of a pen. Because it's not a very long novel. And but I just loved it. And I've never quite read anything like it, except maybe the three Big End books and The Crying of Lot 49. So I think he's one to watch.
Well, thanks.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned Elon Musk, if anybody here hadn't heard, he was in the news recently because he said that he thought artificial intelligence was the biggest existential threat that humankind faces. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that subject, on artificial intelligence and ongoing research. And is it a threat, or do you think that's overblown?
I don't, well, considering the existential threats that we're facing, which get sort of cataloged at one point in this book, that's not the one I would be worrying about. I don't know. I remember, it wasn't that long ago that Stephen Hawking told us that it was aliens. He said, quit trying to communicate with alien cultures. Greatest existential threat we face. I don't know. AI. Well, I don't actually have any. I don't have any bumper sticker opinions on AI. I've spent a certain amount of my life trying to kind of evoke different imaginary possibilities of what AI could be like, or what it might mean, but I can't really boil it down into anything. When I started to write the kind of fiction I write, I think one way or another, I made a choice to try to be as agnostic as I could about technologies. And it seemed to me that emergent technologies are huge change drivers, can be huge change drivers. It also seemed to me that the greatest change that emergent technologies bring can very easily be unanticipated change that the inventors and developers and marketers of an emergent technology never dreamed of. The people who did pagers never thought they'd change the drug dealing geography of major American cities and cause huge swaths of payphones to be ripped up by the roots and taken away. But they did. The developers of the internal combustion engine say no more. So we don't know. We don't know what technologies do until people get a hold of those technologies and do shit with them. And then we have to try to legislate after the fact. So I think we're always behind the curve. We don't vote on what technologies are going to emerge.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, this is for tall people. So I wondered what kinds of technologies, or if technology has influenced or changed the way that you write or your processes of writing, and in what ways, and what are the things that you would like technology to do for you in the future for the writing?
Well, I actually, I wonder, that's a really good question, but from my own experience, I'm inclined to think that once a technology becomes a part of my life, or in the case of your question, a part of my writing process, I become anthropologically incapable of evaluating the difference between what I'm then doing and what I did before. And I think it's easier to imagine a future of fully realized augmented reality than it is to imagine what the world was like before television, or than it is to imagine what the world was like before recorded music. And just as a thought experiment, not now, but sometime when you're alone and have nothing better to do, try to imagine what the world was like before recorded music. It's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing to try to do. And if you're anything like me, I think you'll find that you have a really difficult time getting your head around the fact that there ever was a time before recorded music and what it would have meant. I think that which uses word processing, myself for instance, has a hard time remembering what it was like to write before word processing. Except I can tell you that in some ways it was a lot harder because I never learned to type and I had to produce clean manuscript copy in order to sell fiction. And my manuscripts were topographical with correction goop. And like weird, I bought this tape that they used to use on restaurant menus. So they could use the same colored page over and over and just tape the breakfast thing items on. But I don't know what it does. I don't know what word processing has done to my process. And I'll probably never find out because I'm unlikely to go back to the typewriter and the correction goop. I can dimly remember the world before broadcast television, but not enough of it to be able to describe how different it was. The world before ubiquitous smartphones, completely different. What will people think, even now, younger readers now reading fiction written before the advent of cellular telephony will be reading about an alien world of tremendous, near constant solitude in which human beings had virtually no contact with anyone. I mean, that's so strange, and yet we don't think about it. I remember I was in London once, and it was right before cell phones came to London, and they hadn't yet come that I knew of to Vancouver, and I rode on the tube in midwinter and thought fondly of the enforced solitude of life in London and how you went on the tube and nobody spoke to anybody and you never made eye contact and no one talked to anybody and everyone was forced to be with themselves and how great that was. I mean, it seemed like kind of magnificent and weird to me that London worked that way. And then I had to go back like 2 months later, and it was still winter, and I went on the tube again, and everybody was talking. Everybody on the platforms was talking. Nobody was alone anymore. Like nobody. They got phones so quick, maybe because of that solitude. And it's never been the same since. Like it changes. As the French poet said, the city changes faster than the human heart. But as for technology, I would like just more transparent interfacing, please. Better interfaces. Like something that I can't screw up is what I like. But thank you.
Thank you.
This more is a question and an observation. I find myself rereading some of your older novels because I miss feeling and remembering the imprint it had on me back in the 90s, early 90s, when both the novels came out and the internet was starting to become, blossoming at that point. And I reread them because I miss the worlds that you write about in the descriptions and the phrasing. The question is, when you write a great novel like a Neuromancer or the Count Zero, those types of books in your past, do you ever miss that world? Do you ever think back and have some sort of nostalgia about what it was like to imagine that place?
Actually, no. Well, it's a serious question. They're not, there's scarcely there's really no way in which I could claim that those books are in any way autobiographical, but they were necessarily made up of the stuff of my life. However much the stuff of my life doesn't resemble those books, what else did I have? It was my imagination working on the stuff of my life and my view of the world. So were I to look at them, which I don't do really unless there's some business reason to do it. When I look at them, I have I don't know if nostalgia's not exactly the right word, but I have a sense of what my life was like at the moment I wrote them. But I don't feel longing for the sprawl, say, because, well, for one thing, to me, it's like for anybody else reads those books, I think it's like seeing a Chinese New Year dragon dancing down the street, and the outside's got sequins and gilt and bright red paint and green swirly stuff, and it's doing this complicated dance, and you can see the legs of the guys underneath. But when I look at it, I just see the inside of the dragon. It's just like paper mache with Chinese newspapers and bamboo. It's like I can't go into that text without going inside it. So it's like I can't go on the Disneyland ride because when I go there, I go behind the wall where it's all sweating concrete and rat poop and lost nuts and bolts. So it's kind of the nostalgia for my own fiction is sort of never opened for me.
Thank you.
That is our last question. Thank you so much for coming.